Welcome, everybody. This is F1 Chase for the Title. I'm your host, JB, alongside my colleagues, Billy. Hello.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry.
Okay. Just changed from morning to afternoon. So,
yeah.
Steve, say hello.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon.
And last but certainly not least, Chase.
Hello.
So, as we broadcast here, we just came off the Portugal Grand Prix, which was an interesting race, if maybe not an exciting one. Lots of stuff to talk about. But before we do, I thought maybe we touch on a little bit of news that happened during the course of the week. There were a few things that went on that sort of caught my attention, and I thought that might be worth talking about. But it seems like Hamilton's a little frustrated based on what he said during the course of the week. And having said that, he won this week, but it seems like he's a little frustrated. But he's also made a statement that he believes he'll be back with Mercedes next year. So I guess if gamesmanship, I guess Lewis is starting early because obviously we just came off an extended contract renewal discussion. And now he's saying, yeah, I think I'm going to be back with Mercedes. Dr. Bill, what do you think about that?
I'd be surprised. I mean, I guess similar to the tire code words or whatever mysterious words he was doing in his radio transmissions at the end of the race, maybe this is a similar code word, fake out on his part. Who knows? I mean, it's early. You never know what the heck's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I think at this stage of the game, particularly if he ends up winning his 8th title, Steve, I mean, do you think there's anything to come back for?
Yeah, not particularly, but I think that now is the right time with the amount of changes that are going to take place next year. I think it is the absolute right time to start a new generation of drivers at Mercedes. Within their development program, whether it's bringing people up or it's pulling from existing drivers. But now is the time for change.
And speaking of that, Chase, it was an interesting week for your friend George Russell.
Yeah. I think race pace today wasn't there. I don't know if there was something with the car or whether that was him. I'll probably watch the post-race stuff afterwards. But I mean, one of the things I'd like to focus on, because it was the thing he did well, was qualifying yesterday, P11, which is like the best he's done in a Williams yet. And I think he's only going to get better, really. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, I think he showed a fair amount of maturity during the course of the week, which he didn't show after the accident with Bottas last week, that basically he admitted that he was, certainly his reaction, he admitted that he was a total fault. And most of the racing world said the whole thing was just a racing incident. They didn't put blame on either driver. So, but then he started to make some comments about, well, I got to race differently against Bottas and Hamilton because they're potentially, teammates type of thing. I think then Toto Wolff was like, whoa, just race your race, kid. Worry about what's going to happen later. Don't make it sound like it's more of like we're in cahoots together. And so I think he sort of went back and forth a little bit, but I think by today it seemed like everything calmed down and everybody was ready to race. But so anyway, I think that one of the things that when we were going into the race today, it was interesting to see how the top 3 guys would, get off to a start. And it was an interesting thing with Bottas getting out to a quick lead, right, Steve?
Yeah, it was. He performed great in qualifying, and I think it was interesting to watch, how all the drivers performed at the very beginning of the race, between Verstappen and Hamilton. Going back and forth, it definitely made. But Bottas is starting strong. It's the finishing strong that he's got to follow through on.
And let's back up a little bit and say, hey, Dr. Bill, can we look at you have the starting grid there by any chance?
Yeah, and there was a couple of interesting things. I mean, I don't know if there's anything to it, but when I looked at the starting grid, what struck me was almost like as a measure of how strong each team is the separation of teammates. For example, Mercedes, obviously, is a very strong team. What are they? They're 1-2. Red Bull, very strong. What are their guys? 3-4. And then it starts to spread out where you go, Ferrari's a little bit more spread out. You got Alpine a little bit more spread out. Even obviously, as Chase was saying, Williams, you got George up at 11 and Latifi at 18th. So I wondered if that was just that struck me just kind of a measure of the strength of the team, is that you get more, more symmetry or more consistency maybe in how each of the cars perform.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I looked at, and I made a note right after qualifying, was not only was it a nice pole by Bottas at 17th, but I thought the positions, when you look at 4 through 10, I thought you're looking at kind of the present and future of Formula One. When you look at Perez was qualified 4th, Sainz qualified 5th, Ocon 6th, Norris 7th, Leclerc 8th, Gasly 9th, and bringing up the rear, so to speak, was Vettel at 10th. And I'm like, those are names we're going to be talking about, I think, over the next decade, assuming everybody stays healthy and, interested and what have you. And I thought, that's really where the action's going to be, I think, starting next year, because with all the changes in the cars and stuff, and then with these guys having 3-4 years respectively or more under their belt, they're going to be ready. We're going to be right in their racing prime. So I thought, that could be really sort of a cool thing for these guys all to sort of be, because they also have good relationships off the track, right, Chase? You see these guys are playing golf together and kidding each other and giving each other a hard time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Instagram is a really good source for all that stuff. I remember for a while, it was really that 2018 rookie season that they were all kind of doing stuff together. But I think now, as they've kind of gotten into all these different teams and gotten to know the other drivers, everyone's very friendly off the track, which is good to see. It keeps it healthy.
Yeah, and to Dr. Bill's point about teammates and stuff, I was thinking that while I was watching. I said, I've been watching Formula One for forever, and it seems like obviously on any to the championship teams, there either is a clear mega dog like we have with Bottas and Hamilton, or we have heated rivalries between two drivers who both think they're A drivers. Here I looked at it, and it seems like we got a sort of a combo of teams that really seem to be guys who complement each other, both literally and figuratively, but are as competitive as hell, but do it in a civil manner, right, Steve? I mean, and I look at it and I go, there's as Dr. Bill was talking about, there's 5 or 6 teams that I think are actually really teams now, not just like an A and maybe a B minus or a B driver. What do you think?
Yeah, no, and I think that was part of the reshuffle that is 2021. Chase and I had a good post-qualifying discussion yesterday, talking about some of the big names that have switched teams and some of the high expectations when you think about Alonso, Ricardo, moving to different teams and having high expectations, but yet they're struggling.
Right.
But then again, you look at from a team perspective, the way Red Bull is running right now with Verstappen and Perez. Perez is doing a lot better this year than Albon did last year as far as putting himself in the top 5. So I think that every team is kind of excited to be with each other. Now, granted, it's still early in the season, so that level of competitiveness, that comfort in cars isn't really there just yet. So they're more in team mode, but it'll be interesting to see if that holds together.
Yeah, I will. But so far, it looks like their interaction with each other seems to be like they can kid, almost brother-like. They can kid each other, give each other a hard time, but they're still teammates. But at the end of the day, they want to beat each other's brains out. They don't want to lose to their teammates. So, but as this race started, I guess to me, it's kind of a race, and I guess really in 2 parts, which is not unusual for Formula One. The first 20 laps was pretty much standard issue with waiting to see. From my perspective, I was waiting to see how far up Ricardo was going to come, and he came up fairly quickly from 16th, working his way up the field. And Bottas was out there, looked like things were pretty good. And the question was going to become about who's going to box first and tire strategy. And Perez, we'll talk about a little bit later. Perez, he's the man you want driving your rental car if you don't want any damage to your tires, because it's unbelievable what he was able to do. Dr. Bill, what were your thoughts about the first 20 laps or so of the race? Okay, I can't hear Dr. Bill, so I'm going to go to Steve right now.
Yeah. The first 20 laps was pretty standard. I think what made it a little bit interesting is some of the jostling in the first lap as it was between Hamilton and Verstappen. Clearly, Max getting out ahead of Hamilton was added to the element of exciting, splitting Mercedes up for a bit, which was exciting. But I thought it was pretty clean, with the exception of the lap 2 safety car that came out, and Kimi, and I guess we'll discuss this is, the incident between Kimi and was it Giovanni?
Nazi, right?
Yes. Thank
Giovinazzi.
you, Chase. Yes. That brought out the early caution, which bundled up the field again. But I thought that was a bit interesting.
Dr. Bill, you back?
Yeah, I muted it so you wouldn't hear my dog barking right here.
Oh, okay.
I actually was starting to have a glimmer of hope that maybe Bottas will hang on, but almost, I guess, like the Buffalo Bills, or the old Buffalo Bills, that was quickly dashed as he reverted to form and just kind of drifted back.
Well, isn't it interesting that last week Russell is slapping Bottas on the side of the helmet, saying basically, "You caused an accident by moving over to block me." And today, I'm watching this race, and Bottas is out in front, and Hamilton's catching up, and they come down the straight. Hamilton makes his move, and to me, it just looked like Bottas just moves way over. And they're like, "Oh, Bottas makes his move to block. Block? How do you block by moving away from the guy?" I mean, totally looked like he just threw his hands up and gave the position. But they said, "Well, what a racing move by Hamilton." I'm like, the guy moves over. Anybody can pass him. Chase, what do you think about that?
So racing line wise, usually when you move towards the inside, when you come to a turn, you slow down and you can park it kind of on that apex and keep the outside man from hitting the apex, and he has to slow down, avoid you, and you can get by and keep going at that point. I think he slowed down too early, and Hamilton was able to get to that apex before Verstappen could really park his car there. So then there was just no point. Now he slowed down and he couldn't block. So that's kind of what went on there. But yeah, I mean, it's very different. And I think you comparing him blocking off George versus Hamilton, George is a clear contender for his seat. Hamilton already has a seat in Mercedes. So I don't think there's as much of a pressure to block Hamilton as there is for with George, because, that's just already a seat that's been taken.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I know. You're right. You're technically right, of course, and I think maybe that's the thing. Bottas it looked like for the distance and such he made that. I don't disagree about your thing about curve and whatever, but it looks like he started and pulled over way too early, and it just either he underestimated how quick Hamilton was coming up or what. But it wasn't very impressive to me. But so basically, from that point on, Lewis gets in the lead. And I think, Dr. Bill, you were talking about this, that it's amazing the difference between when Hamilton's in the lead and Bottas is in the lead, how Bottas basically looks like he's hanging on for dear life when he's in front, and Hamilton goes, "See ya," right?
Yeah.
Just trusts the lead.
Yeah, you look at the deltas between the two. When Bottas was in front, Lewis was maybe anywhere from 1 to, at the most 2 seconds behind, and it was consistently like that. And then when the lead switched, Bottas just goes from 1.7 to 2.2 to 3.4 to 4. And so he's just drifting back, and I think they were on the same tires and the same age of those tires. So what's the difference other than the driver?
Yeah, and speaking of tires, I mean, Perez was unbelievable today, right? I think he go almost 50 laps on his initial tires.
I think at one point I saw 54, but
that's unbelievable, right, Chase? I mean, to be able to do that, I mean, how does he do that? I mean, because it was like the commentators were like, he's got a box. Like, he kept staying out there.
I mean, a lot of it comes down to the speeds that you're entering and exiting corners, how fast you get on the throttle. So reducing wheel spin. If you lock up your tires, it's gonna drag them. It's more about keeping them rolling safely and not letting them overspin or underspin. But yeah, 54 laps. I think it was longer than that, but that's just so incredible. And I mean, granted, it was on the medium tires versus something like the soft, but that's still way, nearly double the expected lifespan, I think, for those.
Yeah. So it was an interesting race, and lots of stuff was going on sort of in the midfield too. And I was watching, I think Alonso made a bit of a charge towards the end. And where did he end up? Did he finish 8th, Alonso?
Yeah.
Okay, and he started what, like 14th?
He started pretty far down, yeah.
So I thought that was impressive. He seemed to be still in it, whatever. And Vettel, I'm not sure what happened with Vettel today. He looked like he was making some moves, but it looked like he fell back. But Sainz had a good race. I mean, I think there's a lot of things you can point to that Norris, of course, and so I think there was some good stuff. So who got
Danny Rick moved up? He had a great race where he started on the grid. He was, where the heck was he?
16th, right?
Yeah, and he moved up.
I think he fell back a little bit because at one point I think he was up to what, 8th, Chase, and I think did he finish at 10th?
He was up to 5th at one point, but that was because he had not pit yet, and everyone else had. As soon as he pit, he dropped back down, but he was up there pretty high for a little bit.
Yeah, I was surprised at how poorly he qualified.
Yeah, he was not happy with his qualifying at all, nor should he have been. But so Steve, who was your driver of the day?
It's kind of tough to say. There wasn't anyone that really stuck out significantly based on what I saw this weekend. Obviously, Hamilton did provide a very dominant performance, but I'd have to say that nothing really stood out in my mind. I was happy that Mick Schumacher was able to get ahead of Latifi. And you even saw towards the end of the race there was some good racing before he ultimately got lapped again. But he's continuing to show promise, and that's good. So small baby steps for Schumacher.
I think that in my view today, it's confirmed that there is a new Romain Grosjean in Formula One. His name is Mazepin.
Yep.
This kid can't seem to freaking do anything right and seems to be going out of his way. I mean, he's trying to block Perez. I mean, what the hell is he thinking? What is he thinking? Like, he's not going to get flagged for that? He's lucky he didn't actually complete it, because if he'd taken him out of the race, God knows what. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a prize that just keeps giving. So, I think Grosjean, at least normally all he does is hurt himself when he makes a mistake. And I'm not making fun of the accident. I mean, just like when he would make dopey penalties for doing this or that.
Well, I'm sure Red Bull is going to remind him of that little incident sometime in the near future.
Yeah, that was not good.
Because Perez, I think at that point was trying to save. He was still on his old tires, I believe.
Yeah.
I think he had to lock up to try to, because of that idiotic move, and that was So,
I don't know, but Jace, who would be your best driver today?
I'm not sure. Off the top of my head, I would say Lando for like the third time in a row or whatever, but I want to double check the standings really quick.
He's still ahead. Lando, I think he's third.
Yeah,
he's ahead of Bottas, 37 points. I think.
Yeah, he is amazing.
Lando Alonso or Lando Norris, but I think Lando. It's like, I know I got the McLaren flag next to me, but still, it's like he's blowing all my expectations for this season, especially coming into it being like, oh, Daniel Ricciardo's your teammate. Like that's going to be so much more of a challenge. He's consistently doing well. This was like his first time this season finishing out of the top 4, and it was only one position behind. So really good race for him.
And I think we've talked around it, but I think the biggest mover of the day would it be Ricciardo or?
Ricciardo went from 16 to 9. I just was looking at that.
Oh, he did go to 9? Okay.
Yeah, and Alonso, I was thinking, all right, out of these two guys, I like both of them, and I'm like, well, Alonso went 13 to 8, pretty good, and and it seemed like once he got on those, I think he got on hards at the end of the race. Suddenly his car just like came alive, and he was just flying.
Yeah. It was almost looking like somebody said, "Hey, Fernando, do you still have it?" He's like, "Yeah, I still got it." Well, show us something. And you're right. And
we're going to Spain next week, so you better show up with bring something. Right. And so and Ricciardo went 16 to 9, so that was impressive as well.
So if you had to pick somebody who came out of the race the biggest loser, Steve, who would you say is the biggest loser from today's events? I think it's pretty obvious, but
wow, that sounds like a very directed question.
Wow. Well, I guess I have two to throw in there, and I hope it's okay to do that. Number one, I'd say it's not that there was high expectations for Alfa Romeo, but I think Kimi going out as early as he did on a what I would consider a stupid mental mistake, that and not being able to finish is number one. But that's from an error. From just a flat out performance standpoint, I'd say I'm disappointed in Lance Stroll, as well as all of Aston Martin. That really just has not moved the needle this year at all, based on where they were coming from last year.
Interesting. Chase, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the obvious answer would be like George Russell, but I'm gonna get that one out of the way. I think the two that I would say are one, maybe Bottas, because starting pole and giving the opportunities that he had today, he probably, if he had driven a bit better. Me sitting here in my basement telling Bottas that he should have driven an F1 car better. I think he could have maybe come with the win. And the other one, I think, oddly enough, might have been Sainz. He was very strong, looked like he could have taken third there off of like the restart, and like he just had a really strong start. And he finished 11th. He finished out of the points. Like he just, after like that first like 10 laps, he just kept dropping, and there was not much he could do.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that these individual storylines are what makes it sort of fun. And was it really any? I don't think we've talked about a couple of the notorious, or I don't want to call them notorious, but the Bottas Hamilton overtake was maybe the one that drew my attention for what it wasn't. But was there any? Did you see any overtakes that you thought were kind of cool today, Dr. Bill?
I like the Alonso one. I don't forget. It was again turn one, and I forget who he was overtaking, but it seemed like it was just an instant replay of the Hamilton Bottas overtake, because it just looked so similar, where he just came down the straight. Whoever he was overtaking went on the inside, he went on the outside, and just slingshot and blew right past him. It was and I think Lando had a pass earlier in the race. I forget who he was passing, and that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, that was going to be.
Is that the one he had to? Did he have to give that one back?
No, that was later. That was Perez. The one that he had a really good one on was Ocon.
Yeah. So it was a good passing track.
Steve, anything there?
The only one that sticks out in memory really is Hamilton's overpass of Verstappen to take position in the first third of the race. I thought it was like they were driving two different cars. Hamilton just completely flew by him, and it was just not even a challenge. But it was solid.
Yeah, I mean, I think that from my perspective, I think the biggest loser, I think, was just maybe today was not one of those days where it was excitement that you want from a Formula One race. It was just kind of perfunctory, and just I don't know. It was one of those ones where it's like I was hoping for more based on the starting grid and stuff, but I mean there were no disasters, so I guess that's good. But nothing to get too exciting about from my point of view. So we're going to be.
Bottas continues. If he doesn't have bad luck, he's got no luck at all, because suddenly he's got an engine sensor problem or an exhaust sensor problem, whatever it was. It's slowing him down. It's just like I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, and it just as Chase points out, it just makes that seat of Bottas is getting warmer and warmer underneath him as you got, at least George Russell and who knows who else breathing down his neck for that spot next year.
So, they may not be next year. It wouldn't surprise me if they pull a Red Bull and halfway through switch him, take him out and put Russell in there.
Well, it'd be interesting because Mercedes is certainly not beyond doing that if they think that's the right move. But
I think that's the second race in a row where Toto's gotten on the radio saying, "Let's go both. Let's go, Valtteri. Just step on it." And usually he doesn't get on the radio at all.
Right. Yeah, it was so that was interesting because I didn't. That's an interesting point because I didn't really pick up on that. But yeah, you're right. That's not when Toto speaks, the whole western town freezes, and so he must. It's like Valtteri. This is Toto. George Russell's like, what's he saying? Is he telling me let me buy? So I think that. Well, hopefully, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But let's look at the standings. So after this race, I think we talked about it. We got Norris still on top. Is that right?
Yeah, let me see if I
Pull
can
that up and
share.
show it.
We'll get a little crazy technology going here. So based on the standings from today, Lewis Hamilton remains on top. A little further separation between Lewis and Max, but as Chase was pointing out earlier, Lando holds a solid third with 37 points, and Bottas just is kind of floundering in fourth place. Leclerc rounds out the top five for Ferrari. Yippee skippy. But with Sainz getting no points today, that was disappointing for Ferrari overall.
Yeah. And let's do we have the constructors there?
Yeah, let's.
I mean, Mercedes. It's got to be Mercedes and Red Bull, right? 1 and 2.
Yep. So there we go. Mercedes at 101, Red Bull at 83. And points is big. You saw at the very end, both Bottas came in for a pit as well as Verstappen soon after, because they found out one was going to try to get the fastest lap, because I think it was held by, was it Perez? I think that had the fastest lap up until then.
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah, and ultimately Verstappen was able to get the fastest lap. But every point is going to be key.
And I think that's an interesting tell as far as what the teams think, how close this is going to be later in the season. That they're going to go and what they do 4 pit stops in the last couple laps. They put Valtteri, Perez, and then Max came in just to get 1 point. It was pretty interesting. And I think I believe his point was taken away for track limits.
Mm-hmm.
I think it went back to. Did it go back to Bottas?
Yeah.
So
I think another interesting aspect when you look at, granted we're only a few races in, but there's only 7 teams with points right now. Obviously, Mercedes is at the top with 101, but rounding out the bottom with 5 points is Aston Martin.
Yeah.
So they've got a long hill to climb to get back to where they were last year. McLaren's at 53, followed by Ferrari at 42. I think everybody can agree they never expected to see Ferrari at number 4 this year, but hopefully they can maintain their consistency.
No, what is Aston Martin running? Are they running a Honda engine or
Mercedes?
Mercedes. Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's Mercedes.
Aston Martin's on Mercedes. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's tough to remember what the alliances are here. But okay, so they're running Mercedes engines. All right, interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see them, like you're saying, kind of like similar to the race today, that they're just down in 7th with AlphaTauri actually ahead of them. It's like it's kind of very surprising that this is the way their season is going so far.
But it's just true. So as we come out of this race, I had a little thing I'm calling. Who's coming out in the DRS zone? If you had to, besides the obvious picks, is there a driver or two that you think basically has some momentum? That's what I'm saying. The DRS zone, they're sort of coming out of this feeling good because of what they accomplished based on their own expectations. I'll start with Chase. Who would you say would be your DRS zone guy? You pick anybody you want and just give us a brief.
Probably Mick Schumacher. It wasn't like a lot today, but I think watching him pass Nicholas Latifi, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed seeing him not be so far down there. Especially after he was held up by traffic. But I would say Mick Schumacher, yeah.
And he's driving the Haas, so it's like the Haas is like they're going nowhere this year.
It's a challenge in itself.
It's driving like a taxi cab out there. Yeah. Yeah, I think my sense is there are a lot of people rooting for Mick Schumacher to make his way up the grid, because I think there's just a lot of fans of his father, a lot of empathy there for what the family's gone through the last few years. And boy, wouldn't it be kind of cool if this young man could become a real contender in a few years, and with real equipment underneath him, it'd be really interesting to see how far he can go. And based on what I could see too, the other thing I think it's been, I don't know if it's been by design or just by happenstance. He hasn't done he has certainly not gone out of his way to do anything to put the spotlight on him. You know what I mean? And he's not drawn attention to himself or tried to sort of feather his nest with more publicity, whatever. At least with what I could see, it just seems like I'm here to race. I had a lot to learn, and I'm doing my thing, and hopefully we'll have team success. So I agree. That's a nice pick. I like that.
And he doesn't have any mentor to look to on the team. I mean, he's got actually somebody to look to not do as far as his teammate goes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right. It seemed that there were a couple of drivers that off track he's been very friendly towards, and I think they were drivers that were friends with his father. So Sebastian Vettel, Kimi Räikkönen, he's been very comfortable with them, which does lead me to think that if he's going to get pulled out of the Haas team, he's going to go to Alfa Romeo, because he was testing there last year. But the bad spot right now for anyone in the Ferrari driver program, he is up at Ferrari. That's the only good team in the Ferrari program. Haas and Alfa are both way down there. And Ferrari's got two drivers that they really like right now. And I think if he does go to Alfa, it's going to be another awkward situation like Giovinazzi, where he's not a bad driver, but there's just nowhere for him to go. And I don't see him lasting much longer.
Interesting. Well, don't forget, his father retired and came back and drove for Mercedes. So he's got strong relationships with Mercedes too. So, I mean, I guess it all depends on how you're going to be able to judge young Mick's performance in perspective with his equipment. How much better would he be if he had a real car underneath him? And so I don't know, but that's why those guys get paid a lot of money to judge that talent. But
and who knows when they come next year? Because apparently, from what I've read, Haas is basically this is just marking time this year. And they're putting all their resources into developing their car for next year. So if he's still there next year, he may have a decent machine to drive.
So they might be tanking more than just being crappy. This might be some.
Yeah, I think this is just a dead year for them. They're just gonna, just get through the year basically.
Learn.
Yeah,
get these kids to learn.
Right.
Yeah, right. So I think that's pretty much a summation of this race. It was a tidy one. Went on time. There weren't a lot of accidents. Not a lot of safety car shenanigans going on. The weather was decent. Bottas folded like a cheap house of cards. Hamilton won. Verstappen was not happy. No matter what he does, he's not happy. So I think all was right with the world. And we saw some young guns mixing in with some old guns, and in midfield. And I think that continues to be probably the most interesting part of the field right now in terms of the action. But if the Mercedes and Red Bull can trade, if we can flip over to Spain next week, and if they flip the cards at Red Bull, then maybe we're going to have something that's going to go on for the whole season, because we got 23 races in total, folks. We've just finished 3, so a long way to go. Nothing's decided by any means.
And Red Bull is knocking at the door. They're just nipping at, to use another analogy, they're just nipping at Mercedes' heels. They are right there, and Mercedes knows they're there.
They are, and Perez is performing well in that car. I mean, we talked about drivers that have momentum. I think Perez being able to adapt to that style of car as quickly as he has, and to be a threat within the top 5 as consistently as he has, that can only spell good things for Red Bull moving forward.
Yeah, and that's why I look at Bottas is that Mercedes may look at him and say, our main opponent, Red Bull, has 2 contenders, and we have really just 1. So we need to make a change if we're going to try to win this season, the constructors at least. So.
Well, that'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. And back to Perez for a minute. They had on the ESPN and Sky Sports coverage, which they do an hour and a half pregame show, and they played a segment where they had Verstappen and Perez sitting with each other, being interviewed by one of the folks on the team there, and it was interesting to watch their interaction with each other. And it's almost like Perez gets Verstappen, like he gets him. He understands what he's all about. He knows how to jab him a little bit and get Verstappen to smile and come back at each other. And clearly they have a lot of respect for each other. And I think that's important. I think Max needs somebody not that he needs to be more motivated, because he's clearly a driven, literally and figuratively kid. But I think having a teammate that's more of a peer age with him in respects, and was also very talented and help him score points, I think is probably, in the long run, a great gift for Max, really, as opposed to just having him being so clearly ahead of his teammate. at this point in his career, I don't think that would be the best thing for Max. I think he needs what he's got here.
I think it was very telling at the end of qualifying yesterday. After qualifying was done, Max was, I think before they did the interviews or whatever, Max was talking like off to the side, like under a stairwell or something. He was talking to Perez, and it seemed like they were talking like your point, like peer to peer, like, you know, and he's just like getting his hand in the camera, like, get the hell out of here. And obviously he feels respect for Perez more than he has any of his other teammates, I think, in previous years. So I think he's had somebody who he can maybe learn from, actually.
Right. So yeah, so that's something to watch. That's a dynamic there to watch, and I think the Sainz Leclerc relationship will be an interesting one to continue to sort of keep an eye on, because if one of those guys right now, Sainz is really, I mean, I don't know what people expected, but I think he's outperforming expectations from my point of view. In terms, I didn't think the Ferraris were going to be that competitive at all this year. I thought they were going to talk about tank. I thought they were, you know, even though it would be horrible, I thought they were maybe going to say, guys.
I thought they wrote it in.
Yeah, I thought they were going to say it's a new world next year, like we talked about last season. Hang on and get us to 22, and we'll be back. But they don't. So the combination, whatever changes they've made, and having these talented guys driving, I don't know, they're competitive. It's really good.
Yeah.
So, all right. So Chase, what's next up for us again?
You mean like the next race?
Yeah.
I think it's Spain.
Spain. That's pretty close to Portugal, I believe, isn't it?
I am not good in geography, so don't ask.
It is. It is, James.
It's pretty close. Yeah.
Don't ask me about geography. That was not one of my strong suits.
All right. Well, it's for the viewers out there, Portugal is very close to Spain. They're very close. Like they're neighbors almost, you might say. Well, they are neighbors.
They're more like Iberian neighbors.
Yeah, they're good pals. There's lots of good friendships there. And so we don't have a week. We only have less than a week off then, right? Because they'll start warm-ups and stuff and pre-practice and whatever on Friday, and we'll be off to the races literally next weekend. So that's kind of cool.
Yep.
And then after Spain, looking ahead just a little sneak peek. Steve, what comes after the Spanish Grand Prix? Do you know?
Yeah, that would be a small race held in a small country of
With
Monaco.
small cars, with small people?
Small cars, small people, just small all around. A small race in mind.
And so as we close out another show, I want to thank my colleagues, Dr. Bill, Steve, and Chase, for their contributions today. Most of it was actually interesting. There were a few things that were, really not that interesting, but some of that was coming out of my mouth as well. So hopefully the fans will forgive us the stuff they don't think is so smart and really focus on stuff that is smart. So when we're in the DRS zone of commentary, point that out. Don't point out when we, blocking or doing something wrong. So we hope to see you next time. Thanks very much for tuning in. So long.